Yo, what is up everybody, it's Jay Great here and welcome back to another reaction video here today. And today, we're reacting to a new person on the channel. His name is Outlaw Truth. I know he's in the same group as Six and those guys. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with Six and his group of guys through the Discord realm. And Outlaw Truth is one of the better debaters out there. And as you can tell by the title of this video, this is the strongest Chunin exams participant. Right, so this is one of the most contentious aspects in all of Naruto, I would argue. Quite possibly the most contentious. Right? Ranking the Chunin exams participants. Gaara, end of Chunin exams Sasuke, Neji, Rock Lee. There's always a comparison to be had. Right? And I have my thoughts on it, but I'm going to save it until after the video or during the video if I disagree with something. But yeah, I'm very intrigued to see what Truth has to say about who he thinks are the strongest Chunin exams participants. I'm intrigued on what feats he's going to extrapolate from the manga literature and use to build his arguments. I'm very intrigued for it. I'm always intrigued to hear people's opinions on this because it's a pretty wide spectrum, right? There's people on this side that think Sasuke beats everybody, and there's people on this side that thinks Neji beats everyone besides Five Gates Rock Lee. It's a very contentious topic. But yeah, I'm very intrigued for this one. But before we begin, I always greatly appreciate it. Hit that like button, turn on bell notification to stay updated with yours truly. And if you're new and you enjoy, man, you mess with the kid, make sure to hit that sub button because once you do become part of the family forever. But let's not waste any more time, screen. Let's see what this video rank entails of.
The Chunin exams in Naruto is one of the most praised arcs in the series, and for good reason. Recently, I was reading back the Chunin exams and I couldn't help but start writing this video, since there are so many good potential matchups that could have happened, and I wanted to go over some here. I'll be going through two parts of this video, the first part being ranking the participants in their preliminary states, so nothing like Chidori for Sasuke.
Okay, so preliminaries first.
And of course the second part will be the finals versions. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the channel, and I'd also like to thank you guys. The growth in the channel has been pretty amazing. Also, if you want me to do a topic, go ahead and drop it in the comments below and I'll probably see it. But kicking off at number 20 and 19 in dead last is a draw, of course, between the two useless kunoichi, Sakura and Ino. I don't really think this needs elaboration. Neither of them have any feats really.
I agree.
But they only have feats against each other and they're implied to be rivals, with that even being the name of the chapter that they fight in. Number 18 goes to Kin, one of the Sound 3 ninja. She fought Shikamaru and was able to put up a good fight, but of course in pure Shikamaru nature, he 200 IQ and beat her. So due to her not really having any links to other characters, she's stuck at 18. Number 17 and 16 for me goes to a tie between Shikamaru and Choji, since I don't doubt that Choji has the raw strength to overpower Shikamaru, but I also don't doubt that Shikamaru could outplay him. But it is worthy to note that Shikamaru said he probably would have just conceded the battle if he were to be paired with Choji. Number 15 for me is going to Tenten due to the fact that she literally does nothing. Now, I believe her narrative alongside Neji and Lee of being a more refined student due to training for an extra year gets her above people like Sakura and Ino, but other than that, she literally has nothing to go off of. Her fight is off-screen and all we know is that Tamari countered and completely violated her. Number 13 and 14 I'm giving to Yori and Misumi, Sasuke and Kankura's opponents respectively. They both lose, but Yori's 13 since he's the only one that's actually able to do anything, that being reacting to a weakened Sasuke. But Misumi literally just gets outplayed and destroyed by Kankura, so that's why he goes down to number 14. Number 12 goes to Zaku. Zaku is a character that actually was pretty weird to scale since he relies so heavily on his abilities for the most part. Zaku has abilities like splitting airwaves, which allows him to play at a distance, and as long as his opponent doesn't have a good speed stat mixed with the high intelligence, they probably won't be able to win against him. Hence why he's above people like Shikamaru, since although he does have the high IQ, his speed feats just aren't up to par. Number 11 for me goes to Kiba Inuzuka. Kiba has all of the qualities that I mentioned before that are needed to beat people like Zaku. He relies on his high speed attacks which do devastating damage and his cool head to analyze the situation. Not to mention that he has food pills, which would be an insane tool in battle, due to their buff of chakra that's implied to be even twice as much as normal. Number 10 goes to Dosu. I think it's pretty clearly implied that Dosu was the strongest of the Sound 3 ninja, with him being almost like the boss of them, and the only one who's gonna stick around and make us think he was gonna be an actual part of the story, with his whole narrative building of him wanting to find out Orochimaru's true plans and things of that nature. But unfortunately he got too hasty and would confront Gaara and, well, yeah. But his power is still pretty insane, even though some people like to overrate it. In his fight with Lee, he was getting absolutely pummeled and would have died if it weren't for his teammate Zaku, saving him from the Lotus. Lee, even in base, showed the ability to completely blitz Dosu and only lost that fight due to him not knowing how Dosu's ability works and being distracted. As Tenten says that if he was alone and wasn't distracted, he could have soloed the whole Sound 3. Now moving on to number 9 is Naruto, the famed loser of the Rookie 9. For now I'm talking about the amped Naruto that fought against Kiba, and yes, he's amped if you didn't know. This was highlighted in Data Book 1, where they explain that whenever Naruto says the word Hokage, he gets stronger, showing the pure strength of his own ambition to reach his goal. The reason he's this high is because he has high level jutsu at his disposal, such as Shadow Clone Jutsu, which in my opinion would overwhelm basically anyone below him. Paired with his immense healing factor and stamina, this truly makes him a formidable.
Now, I see Truth's his strategy as far as ranking these Chunin exam participants. It's a safe one to play because he's going based off the very empirical evidence that's provided, right, such as that data book statement. But another strategy that could be used is kind of scaling where their ceiling's at, right, and that obviously will involve non-empirical arguments as well, right, like someone like Shikamaru. We see what he's able to do, right? We see where his IQ is at. We can make some rational inductions that his intelligence would allow him to deal with individuals that might be better than him physically as far as, you know, tangible stats, but because of his intelligence, he'd be able to get a win con against some of them. So I would argue he'd probably scale higher. Naruto, if you really want to scale his ceiling, I mean, technically he has the 9 tails, so you can argue that he's the strongest, even in the preliminaries. Right, we saw what he did against Haku even before the Chunin exams. But I see where Truth is doing, and it's a safe way to do it. So I do agree with his method of ranking these guys because, again, it's all speculation. And even if your rational deduction without any empirical evidence is solid, there is some, even if it's minuscule, speculation. And speculation can be different from person to person, right? I would argue some people would just say, well, we never saw that, so that can't be true. Right, I might disagree with that, but either way, the way Truth is going about it is a safe way of doing it. Right, so it's a very good way of scaling, is what I have to say. Let's continue.
Opponent to face off against. Next up at number 8 is Shino. Now Shino and Naruto in my opinion is actually a very good fight, but in intelligence Naruto is completely outmatched. Even in the data books, when Shino is described, he's described as a great candidate to be Chunin due to his abilities and strategic mind, which is why he lands above Naruto at number 8. Landing spot 6 and 7 is another tie between Kankuro and Temari. Like Shino, both of these characters should be above the likes of Genin level, as they went through severe training under their Kazekage's rule, which is stated in Fan Book 1. The reason they tie for me though is because they don't really have anything else to go off of, but the fact that they should be above the people I've put them above. But the question of who would win in a fight against them is up in the air. Number 5 for me goes to Hinata. Hinata as a fighter is pretty gifted due to her Hyuga heritage. She has the Byakugan Kekkei Genkai, as well as the Gendo Fist technique, which allows her to negate conventional durability by attacking the straight internals of the opponent. The reason I have her above people like Kankuro and Dosu is because I'm using the mentally amped Hinata that fought on par with Neji. Even though whether Neji was going all out is up in the air, in my opinion I don't think he is, since he could have subdued her multiple times in the fight, but even with him holding back, this is still pretty impressive because of the type of genius Neji is propped up to be, which I'll get into during his portion of the list. Number 4 goes to the most talented of the Rookie 9, which is Sasuke Uchiha. Now Sasuke, much like Kankuro and Shino, has the abilities that far surpass the level of Genin, which is shown in his fight with Orochimaru. Even though Orochimaru is clearly toying with him, in the first data book it actually says that this fight was above the limits of a Genin. Now Sasuke vs Hinata, this is actually a pretty good fight. Hinata would most likely win due to her close quarter taijutsu, but when it comes to a mid-range fight, I see Sasuke taking it pretty easily with jutsu like the Phoenix Fire, and I don't see Hinata closing the gap quick enough to take him out and win the fight. Now on to number 3 is Gaara. Gaara is held up to be the demon of the sand village that kills anything without a second thought, and of course, like many others I mentioned before, his abilities are above that of a Genin by a long shot. Being able to surpass the record set by the 4th Hokage Minato in the Forest of Death, Gaara is clearly not something to play with, and is even said to be one of the scariest members competing in the exams. But of course Gaara has his downfall when he almost loses to the taijutsu master Lee. Lee was just clearly outclassing Gaara's sand while weightless and in gates, which is why he doesn't make the top 2. But for Sasuke vs Gaara in the preliminaries, I think it's pretty clear who would win. I mean, Sasuke is the same guy who was getting blitzed by weighted Lee, quite literally not being able to move in time.
That I agree with. He does scale above Sasuke, yes.
Gaara's sand was the same sand that was able to react and block the same Lee, so Sasuke just clearly doesn't have the ability to combat an opponent like that. You could even argue that the sand would just blitz Sasuke before he could even move like Lee did. Now on to number 2 is a curveball, Neji Hyuga. Now I know some of you think that Neji is stronger than Lee, but let me remind you that I'm using these characters in the peak of their power, which means I'm using 5th.
Now, I guess I have an issue with Rock Lee scaling above Gaara, right? So Rock Lee had success against Gaara. That is definitive. It's empirically shown, right, based off the very fight that we see between the two. However, Rock Lee failed to defeat Gaara, even with 5 gates awakened. You could argue that he just didn't have the necessary AP to eventually penetrate the sand, or even when he hit Gaara's kind of skin sand shield, I guess, he didn't have the necessary AP to break it, right? And that was the difference. He might have had the definitive speed advantage at least as far as reaction times, right? Gaara was having trouble reacting, and there's some narrative implications that his sand is somewhat sentient and protects him himself. Even that sand was having trouble reacting to, Gates Rock Lee. But however, Rock Lee almost died by Gaara's hand, right? And I would say that these type of characters, if you want to talk about amps and nerfs, these two characters are almost always amped. Why? Well, Gaara throughout the preliminaries and through the majority of the Chunin exams until post-Chunin exams was always bloodlusted. He always wanted blood, which is why he was so dangerous. He never held back. Right? He was willing to kill. He even said to his own brothers and sister, "I'll kill you if you don't get him. If you get it in my way, I will kill you." So he's always mentally amped. And Rock Lee, because of his conviction, he's willing to kill himself to win. He even got up after getting his ass smashed by Gaara and wanted to keep fighting, but my guy had to intervene to save his life. So I would say Rock Lee does not scale above Gaara. I think empirically that has been shown, and he failed to defeat him, right? Opponent A lost to opponent B, hence, through modus ponens, which is propositional calculus term, if opponent A beats opponent B, then opponent A is superior to opponent B on a balance of probabilities, right? And this was just one-on-one sparring, going at it. So that's my take on that. But again, it's all contentious.
Gate Lee, so I'd appreciate it if you stick around and see my reasoning for his placement when we get there. So Neji's whole narrative during the preliminaries is him being the top genius of geniuses, at least before we see Lee and Gates. Neji is a character that has multiple statements of him being the strongest Guinean, and that holds true to a certain extent. Neji vs Gaara is actually a fight that I originally didn't think was interesting, but I ended up doing a video on it, and it's actually one of my first videos, so if you're interested in that topic, I'd suggest you go check it out. But back to Neji, in Databook 1 they describe him as a top class among Guinean, and is implied to be stronger than Lee before the 3rd gate. The reasoning for this being that Lee is stated by Guy to need the Lotus' speed to beat Neji, which requires the 3rd gate, putting Neji's speed above the likes of weightless Lee. Pairing this with a gentle fist and he becomes an absolute monster to fight against. Now to number 1 of the preliminaries is of course Rock Lee. Rock Lee is a character that completely fits the underdog trope and does it so well you never manage to forget how he's ever an underdog, which is how deeply he engraved his character into us. Due to Rock Lee's persistence to reach his goal of showing everyone that you can be strong without ninjutsu or genjutsu, he's able to reach levels that people without ninjutsu wouldn't even be able to imagine, and goes as far as achieving his goal in this fight against Gaara. When Lee takes his weights off, he's able to completely outclass Gaara's sand in terms of speed, but he was lacking one thing: attack potency. So to compensate for this, he uses the Lotus technique, which overrides the chakra limiters known as the gates. With these gates open, like I mentioned before, he should be able to beat people like Neji in a fight with his high speed, hence his placement. Although he did technically lose to Gaara, his raw power is just on a different caliber, and Gaara was just barely hanging on. I'd also like to mention that Lee, even without using gates, would probably beat most of the people in the Chunin exams besides Neji and Gaara. Now that we've finished the preliminary rankings, we can get into the finals of the Chunin exams.
Alright, so these
In the
rankings will be
finals of the
different,
Chunin
clearly.
exams, everyone takes their power to another level in one way or another, which is what brings these matchups to the next level. Starting up with number 7 and 8 is Shikamaru and Temari. Both of these characters are interchangeable, but I do have Shikamaru above, due to him actually displaying battle IQ above hers, as well as arguably having a better ability depending on the situation. Now to number 6 and 5 is another tie between Shino and Kankuro. While they didn't technically fight in the Chunin exams, they did fight directly preceding it during the Konoha Crush.
Correct.
This matchup ultimately finishes in a stalemate, with both combatants being rendered unable to fight, hence their tied placements. Number 4 is going to Gaara. Now it is important to note that this Gaara is stronger than the one that fought in the preliminaries since he's killed multiple people, and the databook describes his sand getting blood as an amp to its strength. This Gaara doesn't even really need any elaboration for his placement this high. He's clearly above his siblings Kankuro and Temari, with them both being scared of him even outside of his power as a Jinchuriki. On to number 3 is Neji. Now Neji's drop 2 places from the preliminaries to the finals is actually justified, and I'll explain why here. Neji's able to fight and destroy base Naruto, but when Naruto went into his Kyuubi mode, Neji was pushed much farther than we ever seen him be pushed before. They were definitely relative, and I think that is shown pretty clearly with them moving around the same speeds and even canceling each other's chakra attacks out. But Neji inevitably got defeated by the dead last Genin, and the databook even goes as far as saying that when Naruto punched him for the last time is when he surpassed the genius. That means number 3 of course is going to be Naruto in his QB mode. Now I know narratively and with the extent of the power that's shown to us by Naruto, it might be a little weird to think he's number 2, but I promise everything will make sense. Like I mentioned before, he's relative to Neji but just slightly above, with Neji still being able to move at similar speeds to him, which grants him this placement. And now we can get into number 1. Sasuke Uchiha, in my opinion, is undoubtedly the strongest Genin in the finals due to his sheer speed and strength. In his fight with Gaara, he's shown his exponential growth in just a month of training he did. He's able to match Lee's speed after being completely destroyed and blitzed by Lee just a month prior. Speed, however, isn't the only thing that Sasuke gained during his training period. He also gained the Chidori, which amps both his speed and his strength, and will undoubtedly cut right through any of the Genin it hits. Now I'll get into the consistency of Sasuke being number 1 Genin, even above the likes of Naruto and Neji.
Okay.
After seeing Naruto vs Neji, Orochimaru, disguised as the 4th Kazekage Rasa, told Hiruzen that Sasuke is the best opponent for Gaara to fight, if the goal is to show potential climbs to the strength of the Sand Village, clearly implying that he thinks that Sasuke is the strongest one there. The argument that's usually made in response to this is that maybe Oro is just trying to say anything that will let Sasuke's tardiness be excused for just a little while longer, to continue the Konoha crisis planned. But the problem with this is that Orochimaru right before this already convinced Hiruzen to give him more time, meaning that he has absolutely no reason to lie. The next piece of evidence we have is from Databook 1, which calls Sasuke Gaara's strongest opponent, and as we know in Naruto, strongest and strength are usually described as speed and attack potency unless implied otherwise, and this is especially true for Sasuke since in this fight, he did nothing but flaunt his immense speed and attack potency. I'd also like to mention that this is talking about before Chidori, since the statement goes over the fight in chronological order, and only references Gaara's Sand Orb after Sasuke's called the strongest. This gives credence to the idea of Sasuke being stronger and faster than 5th Gate Lee, who of course is stronger than Neji like we mentioned before. There are 2 arguments I see used to defend against this, the first of which being that Neji trains every day, but looking at it from a logical standpoint, I don't think it's safe to assume that Neji from just a month of training will get a Gates level amp, especially since it's implied that in training, Neji is only training his defense specifically, which is what allowed him to unlock and utilize the palm rotation. And there's also the fact that Sasuke has a higher latent abilities stat than Neji, while Neji has a 4 but Sasuke has a 5. Sasuke also has shown the ability to rapidly grow during his fights, and Sakura says he always gets stronger, all the time. And the other argument is that Might Guy simply says that Sasuke is as fast as weightless Lee speed, and nothing more. But the problem with that is in the first fan book, it's somewhat implied that he wasn't going all out against Gaara since he was lost in thought while fighting him, meaning that his chakra isn't as potent as usual since chakra of course is mental and physical energy, meaning that Sasuke is not only weightless Lee speed, since nothing of the sort is implied for a going all out Sasuke. The final argument gluing this all together is actually from an anime guidebook, so if you don't take that as canon that's perfectly fine, but it reads as follows. Sasuke arrives in a whirlwind of leaves, just in time to avoid being disqualified. Gaara grins at the sight. The confrontation between the best of the sand and the leaves begins. This is just blatantly saying that he's the strongest Genin of the leaf, and the only real argument against this is something like, well, Sasuke is not stronger than Kakashi, so it's wrong, but it's clearly in context talking about the Chunin Dance participants and not the entire Leaf Village. But that's all I have for today.
Alright.
If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe, since it helps a lot, and also I have more videos you can check out right here. Other than that, have a good day.
Alright, so I definitely want to get my thoughts on this. Right, so I would say, as far as the Chunin exam finals rankings, I do have some counters to some of Truth's arguments to build his premise. So I would argue that you could put Naruto at number 1, because if we're staying consistent, right, we're using feats outside of the very Chunin exam battles themselves, right, like Truth did with Shino. Well, we got to see what Naruto did against Gaara. He was able to defeat Gaara, nearly fully awakening the One Tail. I think it was fully awakened with the help of Gamabunta, right? Now, some people might say, well, that's Gamabunta added on top of Naruto. Well, that's in his arsenal at that point in time. That's like saying Shino can't use his bugs. That's part of his arsenal. Jiraiya with his, Orochimaru with Manda, Tsunade with Katsuya. So that's part of his arsenal at this point. He's able to use it, right? So that Naruto scales above Sasuke because Sasuke lost to that Gaara. And that was Gaara before he fully awakened the One Tail. So that was a weaker Gaara. That wasn't a fully awakened One Tail. That was one when he was partly awakened, right, with half the half his face being one tail. So that's why Naruto would scale above Sasuke. Now Sasuke, I do hold that statement in the data book pretty high. It says that he was the strongest opponent that Gaara ever faced. So that means he was above 5 Gates Rock Lee, right? It's saying it's the strongest opponent Gaara has faced. Some people say, well, that was a Rock Lee was crippled at this point. It doesn't matter. It's saying it's the strongest opponent Gaara has faced. Meaning, everyone he's faced, we're talking about those versions of the people he faced, right? 5 Gates Rock Lee was someone he faced. Sasuke is stated to be stronger than that. We can't go against what's stated, right? It's literally stated in a piece of canonical literature. Hence, Sasuke is above 5 Gates Rock Lee, who is above Neji, because Neji is only used to up to third. He was only used to up until the 3rd gates, right? Even Rock Lee acknowledged the 4th and 5th gates are for you, and Neji was visibly shaken by the new gates that Rock Lee could awaken, right? Meaning that on a bounce of probabilities, he probably would lose. It would be a threat to him at bare minimum. It'd be a threat to him, and it would be competitive, right? So Rock Lee would probably be 3rd in my opinion if he was healthy. It's a hypothetical. Now the only reason I would say Gaara scales above Neji is because if he loses it, right? If he gets enraged, then he's capable of taking out someone that's stronger than Rock Lee in 5th gates, who's stronger than Neji, more than likely. Hence, I'd probably put Gaara above Neji, in my opinion, because of that fact, right? If he's able to defeat Sasuke, who's stated as the strongest opponent that he's ever faced later on, right, during the Konoha invasion with Orochimaru, then he probably beats Neji as well. Right, it goes Sasuke, Rock Lee, 5th gates, 4th gates, Neji. Gaara's above that when he's enraged. And then Naruto with the Kyuubi amp and Gamabunta is above that. My final ranking would probably be Naruto. Not thinking about it. Naruto would be number 1. You could put Gaara number 2 because he did beat Sasuke later on. Number 3 would be Sasuke. Number 4 would be well, let's eliminate Rock Lee because he was crippled at this point. Neji, and then the rest. Right? We really only care about like the top 4 guys here because those guys are always compared. Now, if you want to put Neji higher, there is arguments for that. Right? There are arguments for that, but that's more speculation. To me, it's a more flimsy argument because there's less empirical evidence to suggest Neji wins. Right? There's less empirical evidence to suggest that. So yeah, folks, that's my thoughts on it. It's even something that I have to think about, and you kind of saw my thought process right now with me kind of deducing who would be above who and why. Again, it's all contentious. Some people think Neji beats Sasuke, and there's some pretty decent arguments, even though in my opinion they're more flimsy. But I don't think you're crazy for saying that, even though I might disagree with you. All right, and even if you do have a good rational deduction, it's stated who's the strongest Gaara's ever faced. Right? We got to take into account the canonical literature that's provided. So yeah, folks, that's my thoughts in the video. Let me know your thoughts. I'm sure you guys' opinions are all over the place. I mean, it usually is. In the grand scheme of the Naruto fandom, there's some very, very different opinions, right? It's some people, like I said, think Sasuke's the strongest, Neji, Gaara, Rock Lee, you name it. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Great video by Truth. He had a pretty good way of scaling everything. That's going to wrap it up, folks, and I'll catch you in the next one. This is Jay the Great signing out. Peace.